Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hensley here at Center Indy in studio at our podcast. Today, I am with Andy Bowman, and he is the program director for Grace House Adult and Teen Challenge here at Hope Center, which is one of the 3 residential programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Yep.
I'm glad you came in today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here and spend time with you.
Thank you. So we haven't got a chance to know each other. I had Mallory Palmer on just before you, which was awesome. And I didn't know her. So it's always fun for me because I get to hear the stories and meet new people. So you and I haven't met. So this is exciting for me because I get to hear your story of how you ended up here. Let's just start with that right off the bat. How does one become a program director of a program like Grace House? How did you end up here?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a long story, but an awesome God story. So I'm Andy Bowman, 35, from Toledo, Ohio. So I was born and raised in Toledo and grew up with 2 awesome parents that love the Lord. I grew up in Assemblies of God Church, real radical, and where they jump around and worship the Lord real crazy. And so as a young boy, I got really involved in the church. I was in junior Bible quiz and memorizing verses. I remember getting saved at 9 and baptized. But the problem was when I got saved, I wanted to go to heaven and not go to hell. And that's about the depth of my relationship with Jesus ever really went. And so my brother was a homecoming king, and he was just an awesome athlete. And so he was like my idol. I looked up to him. I wanted to be just like him. And so in high school, that's what I started chasing with girls and sports. I was quarterback of the football team, point guard of the basketball team, catcher, pitcher on baseball. And so I was just really engulfed in all of the sports and trying to really build my image and wanted everybody to like me. But truly on the inside, I didn't like myself. And so when I got to my senior year of high school, I hadn't done really good with my grades. And my parents, being just the awesome Christian parents that they are, told me that they weren't going to help me go to college if I didn't stop the partying and the drinking and all the stuff I was doing. And so me thinking, well, I'll show you, I decided to go to the Air Force because I was like, well, they'll pay for my college and I don't need my parents. I was kind of going to show them.
Yeah, I don't need you.
Right, yep, that type of thing. And so I go to the Air Force, come back home, and a girl, my high school sweetheart, who I'd been dating for 3.5 years, I found out was cheating on me, and that's where I just really kind of went off the deep end, and I didn't know what love was at the time. It was more of a lust thing, but as a teenager, you don't know how to really handle all your emotions, and so that took me down a deep, kind of dark path. Started drinking a bunch. I got 2 DUIs before the age of 21. I dropped out of college, went to Bowling Green State University, and only went there for a year because I was partying too much, and soon it led me to opiates, and it was Oxycontin at the time, and that turned into a heroin addiction. Ended up getting kicked out of the Air Force after 3 years. When I had got so bad, I remember one night I was up and my heart was racing, and I thought I was going to die. And my mom had called me the day before and said she heard about this program called Teen Challenge, and she wanted me to give it a try. It was this Christian program for like a year, and I was like, oh man, a year of my life at 21, like there's no way I could do this. But that night when I was sitting there with my heart racing and I had been trying for a couple years to get clean, I remember just praying, and that was the first time I heard the Holy Spirit speak to me that he wasn't going to let me die. And that morning at 6 a.m. I called my mom and I said, hey, I'll go to Teen Challenge, I'll give it a try. And so she came, picked me up. I packed everything that I could fit in 2 or 3 garbage bags, and the next day was on my way up to Western Michigan and Muskegon to go to the men's Teen Challenge there.
Wow.
So, yeah, crazy. Just, it was like boom, 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 real quick. Didn't have any time to make choices, which is the best with alcoholics and drug addicts. You got to kind of get them. They say, well, the kettle's hot, make sure you get them. So, or they'll go running again. And so I go up there, and I knew I wanted to get clean and sober, but I didn't really know if I wanted the whole God thing. I didn't even know if I believed in God at the time. I knew my parents did, but I didn't know if I did. And so I get there. I'm really sick. I'm withdrawn, coming off of heroin. I was vomiting, I was bad. And they took me to the hospital because I was so bad. And the staff member, his name was Andrew, he said, hey, could I pray for you? And I'm like, I mean, I guess I don't really need God right now. I'm coming off drugs. I kind of need some medicine or something.
I don't need God. I need something to fix this.
Right. And that's so, but I was like, all right, I guess, man, go ahead. I've had a lot of people pray for me, whatever. And so he prayed for me. And the next thing I know, I was waking up about 20 minutes later in the hospital bed there, and I was completely healed. I woke up, I had no withdrawals, no sickness. I'm like, hey, what are the doctors? They must have gave me something because I'm good. And he's like, no, they wouldn't give you anything. You're a heroin addict. They said you just got to sleep this off and go through the withdrawals. This is what happens. And so I'm like, that's so strange. And I was like, well, we'll just see. It was like 2 a.m. in the morning. I was like, I'm going to go home, sleep. I bet I wake back up and I'll be withdrawn again. So I wake back up the next morning, and I was completely healed. Just a radical miracle of God. Yeah. And I was like, I'm brand new, 21 Christian. I hadn't even given my heart to the Lord yet. And I was like, what the heck is this? So that morning there was a chapel, and the pastor was preaching. I don't know what he was preaching, but I just knew I had just got radically saved. So during worship, I'm raising my hands. I'm not even a Christian yet, but I'm just like, something happened to me.
Right.
Something like tangibly happened to me. And
well, just really quick, I mean, to just explain this, how powerful that was, it normally takes weeks for heroin addicts to withdraw, right?
At least 5 to 7 days of massive withdrawals. Yeah. And then sometimes a month till your body even gets back to normal, because you're cold and shaky and irritable, let alone I had a nicotine addiction too of a couple packs of cigarettes a day, so
this isn't something that just by a fluke you just happen to not have them. I have a little bit of familiarity, and I've heard people say, you can die from alcohol withdrawal. And you're going to want to from heroin. Yeah, it's no joke. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, restless legs, body aches, sweating. Yeah, just real nasty thing for 5 to 7 days, especially if you've been using every single day a heavy amount like I was at the time.
So this is truly a miracle.
Oh, it was a miracle. Only God could have done it, and he knew that's what I was going to need to believe, and so because he knew I was a tough one and I was stubborn. So the next morning we're at chapel. I'm raising my hands. The pastor does an altar call afterwards, and I'm just like, I knew I needed to be up there. And so I gave my life to Christ, got filled up with the Holy Ghost, and felt the presence of God like for real, where I almost fell over that day. And just remember that radically changed the entire course of my life till today. And so that would have been June 27th of 2008 that I gave my life to Christ. And early on in the program, God started giving me like these passions and these visions for youth and teens. And I wasn't sure why, because I was still 21 going on 22. And I'm like, I still feel like a teen, And
this is why you were going through the Teen Challenge program.
This is why I was going through the adult men's. Yeah. Teen Challenge. So I'm in the program for a year, and I'm starting to pray into, okay, God, what do you want to do with my life? How do you want to use me? Because I started getting excited, like, okay, I want to serve the Lord. I want to give him everything. I'll go do anything you want. God had just really touched me in a way that no one could tell me otherwise, that he wasn't real. Once he started giving me this passion and desire for youth, I started praying into that, and I found out that there was actually adolescent programs for boys all over the country for Teen Challenge. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And found out if you graduate Teen Challenge, it actually helps you to go work there, because it gives you kind of some credentials in a sense. You've been through it, and so you can work with them, have an experience, and they can relate to you. And so that led me 13 years ago to an adolescent boys center in Virginia, Newport News, Virginia. And I worked there for about 4 years. And towards the end of my 4 years there, I decided to walk away from ministry. And there's stories all throughout there, but for time, I'll just save those for another time.
Sure. We have a half an hour.
Yeah,
so
I don't want to bore everybody. But so anyway, so I end up leaving the Teen Challenge here, go help kind of do a youth pastor thing back in Toledo, Ohio. But I knew God had told me to never go back to Toledo, because that was where all my old friends were. That was like my Egypt. Like God had taken me out of my Egypt, like he took the Israelites out of slavery. I returned. And so for 2 years, I did kind of a church thing, but really I just started slipping again, getting back with girls I shouldn't have, and really not serving the Lord. And finally, one day when I was talking to my dad, and he was just saying, you're not doing what God's called you to do. When are you going to get back into your calling? And that just really kind of just stuck with me. And there was another time I was driving my car, and my friend's wife was in the car, and she was in the back seat, and she's like, why is your Bible in the back seat? Well, because there's someone in the front seat, and you're in the back. I don't know. And she's like, is that how God is in your life? And that comment kind of stuck with me because at the moment, though she didn't know it, that's how it was. God was riding in the back seat, and I thought I was driving. So anyway, through a course of events, I ended up going back to Teen Challenge, kind of getting back into my call, did what they call a restoration, and that was 7 years ago. Led me to Elkhart, Indiana, where I worked for the last 6 years as an intern, into a staff member, and I ended up getting my credentials, became a pastor 6 years ago, and just knew that God had called me to the Teen Challenge ministry for now. And I don't know how long that will be, but I just knew that God called me to people like myself, the ones that everybody has given up hope on, is the ones that I want, like, okay, bring them here. I want to pray for them, see them get healed. Like, God did it for me. He can do it for you. For the last 6 years, I've just been praying and fasting for a wife. I was like, man, all right, I'm 30, going in my 30s now. Like, God, when's it going to happen? And it still didn't happen, still wasn't happening.
But you got to ask. He says,
yeah,
asks.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was me just learning to be content with who he is and who he created me to be, and realize that I didn't need a wife to fulfill any desires in me, that I was complete by myself. But if he brought that, it would be awesome. But it wasn't something that I was lacking. It was something that would be an awesome benefit to my life and that we could serve and bring him glory. And until I got to that place, I realized he wasn't going to provide it unless I stepped out in the flesh and did it on my own. And so it would be this January would be 2 years ago, yeah. So January 31st, 2 years ago, I reached out to a girl that I'd met in church and sent her a Facebook message.
God love Facebook.
I know. I was like,
my story's Facebook too. So
I always wanted a worship leader, something just like really, I don't know, did something in my heart when I saw like women leading worship. I was like, man, God's made me a pastor, preacher, teacher, blah, blah, blah. I just felt like a worship leader would compliment me well. And I love worship. So saw a worship leader, I'm going to reach out to her. and so through court, ended up working out where she let me take her out on a date, and we ended up getting married May 28th of 2021. So 7 months ago, 8 months ago.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
it's so good. Thank you. Yeah, it was so awesome. And in that, we started praying leading up to May of last year what God wanted us to do, because we knew that we wanted to do ministry together. We didn't know what that looked like. I was working in Teen Challenge in Elkhart, Indiana, full-time. She was helping out at the church full-time. And so it really was, our schedules were way weird and not working together. And so we're just praying, we're saying, and asking God, put us together. Show us what you want that to be. And so my sister, who is the executive director in Lebanon at the Adolescent Girls Teen Challenge, just 40 minutes from here, started asking me like, hey, why don't you come work here? Why don't you come work here? And I'm like, well, it's all women. I don't know what to do with that. Like, it's all women. I think God's called me to the ministry for men, and I've always taught that and preached that. Men counsel men, women counsel women, and still believe that full-heartedly today. But so she started talking to me, and me and my wife ended up both having a dream of packing all of our stuff. And I had just bought a house less than a year ago, and so we thought we were planted there. But he gave us both a dream of packing all of our stuff. And one day when I was in the shower praying and I was coming out, I heard the Lord say, I want you to do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, and so I was wanting like a third and a fourth fleece, like, okay, God, I heard it that time. Can you do it again and again and again? And so when we both had the dreams that lined up, that he wanted us to come here, we ended up accepting the job to come to Grace House, Adult and Teen Challenge, and Lebanon. So I'm actually the executive director here at the Grace House, Adult and Teen Challenge, as well as I'm the campus director and pastor at the Lebanon Teen Challenge as well.
I didn't know they had one up there. My son lives up there.
So that's just for teen girls. Okay. So just for the adolescent girls, That was about 5 months ago. August, I fully came on here full time. And at the time I was like, man, I don't know what I'm getting myself into.
A lot of women.
A lot of women. I've worked with all men for the last, 13 years pretty much. But I just knew that if God spoke it, then he was going to see me through it. And if God said it, then I just do it, just kind of that complete obedience. And so we just by faith came up here. And at first, Grace House was a little bit of a mess. that we were stepping into, and we knew that, and we were excited about that challenge. We wanted something that wasn't going to be easy, that we were going to have to trust God to really just do something incredible. And so the last 5 months here has been awesome. It's been a challenge, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but just have had the really cool pleasure of working with my sister at the Adolescent Girls Center, and my mom a couple months ago decided to retire from her job and start coming and working up here as the program manager.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so she just felt God speak to her one weekend while she was up here to visit and said, I'm supposed to come work there. And so that's been super awesome and cool too.
So you have your mom and your wife that are helping
and my
you,
sister.
And your sister. So it's a family. That is amazing. That is an amazing story.
Is.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So you get here and you're fairly newly married and you're stepping into a new role that's a little foreign to you, just in the fact that it's females versus male. Let's start with that. What's the difference in working with the men versus working with the women? What kind of differences are you? And I'm not setting you up for failure.
I know. I'm like, all right, I got to be careful.
Question.
I'm newly married.
No, right. No, I mean, but what kind of differences are you seeing that you can share without it affecting your marriage?
No, nothing would affect that. I just don't want the audience to be offended.
Right. Absolutely.
Got to be careful. But I mean, it's so much different in the way that men and women express themselves is so different. Men are a lot more closed off and tend to hide all of their feelings, and women don't as much, which is good and awesome. But you just got to get used to that and how to deal with that and how to respond. Coming from the adult men's center I was at, it was kind of like, all right, if you want to be here, you can be here. If you don't, you can go, type thing. And learning here, you really can't take, that really doesn't work really well. Women are super fragile in some ways, a lot of the women that we get. And if you're not really sensitive to the words. So like for me and my wife, what I've learned is she's a really big words of affirmation. She loves words of affirmation. I'm not good with words of affirmation.
Well, you asked for a challenge.
Right? Yeah. So, and God knew, but that's one of my weak points. But I think for women in general, they love words of affirmation.
Right.
And me, I don't want to say we as men, but because I don't want to just put everybody in a category, but me as a man struggle with that. I'm more like how about I'll take you out to a nice dinner and show you I love you type guy, gifts, an acts of service type guy. But I'm learning that with women, they light up when you just encourage them, when you tell them that they're doing an awesome job, when you remind them of, the things that they're doing right rather than continue to let them know all the things they're not doing. And so working with the women is just taking a lot more intentionality and being mindful of the things that I say, how I say them, who I say them to, and just communication is so big. It is so much more important. And it is with men and women, but with the men, you can kind of show them affection in different ways that they receive it and respond, whereas women need it in more from words and different things like that. And so, that's just one of the many big challenges.
That's awesome. I think that's great advice that we could all use, regardless of whether it's program directing or at work. Just this, we like to hear words of affirmation. People like to be encouraged. So I love that. So you've gotten here, you've been here, you said 5 months? So
full time. I've been here technically since June. I did some part-time. I had a 6 months transition because what I was doing up there was a pretty big thing. So that was a long transition. But so since August, it's been, for the most part, full time. That's great. So Mallory had also been here fairly new. So you guys are both new program directors together. And one of the questions that I ask her are, what have been some of your the biggest challenge that you faced coming into Grace House here? Yeah. So the biggest, and still is, even now, only because what I stepped into was really, in a lot of ways, the program of Teen Challenge has been around 60 plus years. I think 60, going on 64. So the program of Teen Challenge, as far as the inner workings, the curriculum, the way that we do things, what we stand on, the word, and all that stuff was solid. But as far as this Teen Challenge here, they really didn't have a donor base. They really didn't have funding. They really didn't have a big support group that had in relationships that were continuing to be cultivated. At one time, I think they did, but we kind of lost a lot of those. And so the biggest challenge as an executive director, not so much the inner working of the programs that was tough for me, because I've been doing Teen Challenge for a long time. The hard part is building the relationships on the outside. And for me, that's tough, because what called me to Teen Challenge and what I love about Teen Challenge is we really try to do life with the students. That's who the DNA of Teen Challenge is we want to be like Jesus. We want to hang out with our students. We want to do life with them. We want them to see us and interact with us and us to be an example, a model of Christ. And so for me, having to kind of like pivot now and be more out in the community, going to churches, to businesses, and trying to drum up support for the ministry is tough, because I want to be with the students. I like to go and do choir songs and do worship and teach them and be around them. And so that's one of the biggest challenges, honestly, for me personally, is now being so separated from the actual student body, as well as learning with women and me being a man, what's appropriate and what's not. I have to always protect myself, never being alone. That's always an interesting dynamic, and just having to be really cautious. Obviously, I want to honor my wife always, but in the culture we live in nowadays, you just have, as a Christian man, you have to be smart. You got to be wise.
Yeah, we did some leadership program development at our church, and one of the things that our pastor went over with us is something that they teach us that immediately was Billy Graham did that. He was never alone with a woman ever, and it's just, especially when you're working with broken individuals, it's just a good practice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the opposite question.
Sure.
What have been some of the most fulfilling moments that you've seen so far since you've been here? What are the things that just really, the God moments that you've gotten to experience?
Yeah, so many. I mean, I had my mom, who I was kind of sharing about, who came up here 3 months ago, and she's been doing her job at the school and is happy and loves it and could have stayed there. But God spoke to her, and she decided to leave Ohio. She goes there on the weekends to see our nephews and nieces and stuff, and she still has her house. But she drives up here 3 hours away every single week to live in the building. My mom at 65 years old lives in the building with the women and just does life with them. So that is just an incredible testimony. But besides that, we had December 26th, 9 girls decide to get baptized. And that was awesome. At Church 52, we had 9 of our students get baptized and have given their life to Christ and shared their testimonies. And that's why we do what we do, is to see the light kind of turn on in them, to see them give their life to Christ, and then not just give their life to Christ, but to start living for Him.
Something I want to make sure we don't overlook is your program is a Christ-based organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the women that come into the program are Christian. So,
no, most of them are. They're on drugs and alcohol. So if they were serving the Lord, they weren't really serving Him. They knew of Him and stuff, but it wasn't like, they're surrendered living for Christ while they're out there, using heroin and doing crack and drinking alcohol. And so most of them come in and were either saved at one time or knew of the Lord, or like one lady we have, she called me up almost 5 months ago now, an older lady in her 60s, and said she had never read the Bible, never heard about God, but her friend was telling her that she needed the Lord, dealing with anxiety, depression, all these different things. And she said, I want to come and give your program a try. And so she ended up giving her heart to the Lord. She's never read the Bible, nothing.
Oh, wow.
Memorizing verses now just Sunday. So yesterday, she just shared her testimony at church. Incredible. That's what awesome. God's doing in her life. We had another girl that came in last week, and just this week she was dealing with some pain in her body and some things going on that was really bad, and she was going to have to go to the hospital, and a guy prayed over her and she got healed, like instantly healed. Was just really cool. And that's happened for 2 or 3 of our students now, and it's been really awesome just to see.
That's amazing. I love that. If we were going to ask the audience, the people that are listening in for anything, what would be some of the needs that you have at Grace House?
Yeah, so one of the big needs right now that we're looking for is what we call spiritual mothers. So we started the spiritual mothers program, I want to say about 4 or 5 months ago. And what the Spiritual Mothers Program is we're looking for some women that have been serving the Lord for 5 to 10 years, at least a little bit of time under their belt of serving the Lord, seeing him be faithful, knowing how to pray and stuff, that would come in once a month or twice a month and pick out one student. We'll give them a student, and they would just come and hang out with them for an hour or two. They could take them to the coffee shop here at the Hope Center. They could take them off grounds and go out to eat with them, but just kind of come and be a mentor. And so we have 3 or 4 students right now that don't have one that we would like to link them up with, because what happens with the students when they see us staff every day, one of the sayings, I know it's not in the Bible. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Probably not. But, the saying of familiarity breeds content. With us staff, we got to discipline them. We're always telling them to do this, to do that. So a lot of times hearing an outside voice with someone who's been serving the Lord makes a huge impact in their life. And so we would love for 3 or 4 women to step up and be like, oh, I would love to do that. It's not a huge investment, but it ends up being big in the long run. And a lot of times they don't just mentor them while they're in the program, but once the students graduate our program after a year, they end up still having relationships and connections with these ladies for the rest of their life. And it's awesome. Super awesome. So that would be one big one. And of course, like I've talked about, if anyone wanted to do financial stuff, we're not going to say no.
Right. we always, nonprofits always need money.
Yeah.
So,
we love food. They love food. If someone ever wanted to cook a meal or bring some cookies by or just an encouragement like that would be awesome. We're praying for some vans right now. We could use a couple vehicles. They're getting pretty old and stuff. And so those are just some. And I guess the last thing that comes to mind right now is we have one room. A church just did a $10,000 renovation on our living room, which is incredible. Just a massive blessing. That just got done about 3 weeks ago.
I have to come see that.
Yeah, you should. It's beautiful. I mean, they decorated it and it's just phenomenal. And so, but we still have the 2 floors that we're working on that we want to make look like that living room and just make it really homey for the girls. We want them to come into a place that like they're just excited to be at. They feel good and it feels welcoming and they enjoy and love where they're at. And so if anybody has some construction, that's a free plug.
They can't see you pointing at me, but yeah, he's sitting over here pointing at me.
Before we started, you let me know you did some construction stuff, you and your husband. So but if anybody has any construction gifts or talents or would like to donate, we would love to eventually get that fixed up for them and just make it an awesome home for them to come and stay and live in.
So how would people that are interested in getting involved, how would they get a hold of you?
Yep. So we have our phone number. I could give that out.
Sure, go ahead.
www.indianatc.org. So if they go to www.indianatc.org, they could go on there and you can donate.
And does that go directly to you then, or that's just Teen Challenge in general?
So when you go on there, there's a donate button, and when you go to donate, it will ask for all the centers in Indiana which one you want to donate, and you would just hit Grace House Adult and Teen Challenge because there's 4 other centers here in the state of Indiana, so you'd want to make sure and hit Grace House so you don't hit the wrong one. And then our phone number here that you could call us if you wanted to call, send a check. The address obviously here's 11850 Brookville Road, and that's Indianapolis, Indiana 46239. And so they could send a check here to us, or our phone number is 317-419-1941, and that'd be a good number for them to call about the spiritual mothers, about anything if they wanted to help. And obviously the biggest thing that we need is just prayer. Yeah. If people would just continue to pray that the power of God would be the biggest thing in our program, that's what we want. We want students to come in and experience the power and presence of God in their life, because that's the only thing. That's the only thing that's going to change them. It's not going to be money and resource. Those things help, but if they don't meet Jesus, then nothing else matters. And so if we could get a massive team around all of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana, just praying for our women daily, that would mean the most to us.
That's awesome. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure. Your story is such an inspiration, and I've loved getting to hear all of that and hear about Grace House, and hopefully we'll get to have you back in the studio again.
Amen.
Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.